Hey gamers, I'm the mid-game boss that can one-shot you because why the fuck not? Patrick.
And who's that Pokemon? It's Jason. Welcome to RPGaymer Episode 9, a podcast about difficulty in video games.
Before we get started, I want to take a moment to introduce this episode's special guest, Professor Bopper. Bopper is primarily known for great YouTube content like in-depth gaming essays, as well as ridiculously entertaining streams. I found Bopper almost a year ago in the midst of a Fire Emblem Iron Man, and I was instantly hooked. In all sincerity, he's the reason I decided to take this journey into video game content creating myself.
Hello, first of all, and thank you all for having me on your podcast. So, I'm a video essayist on YouTube, primarily about video games. Almost everything I've done is on video games. Most people probably know me, if they do, for Fire Emblem video essays and streams. But I tend to think of myself and have been moving in the direction of more general video essays and topics related to gaming. So that's mostly what I do. I do stream, but I think of myself primarily as a video essayist.
I must say, too, it is quite quality. We're not talking like top 10 lists or anything like that here. We're talking, I think, true in-depth video game journalism, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, I would not be caught dead doing a top 10 list unless I had... Well, I mean, you know what? I could see me doing one if I had a very good reason.
Right, like...
Maybe one day I will.
I feel like humor is pretty much the crux of a lot of the stuff that you do, which is a big selling point. So, you know, there's a case for any type of style, but yeah, they don't always come across as the highest caliber of video, do they?
It's the BuzzFeed of video.
No, they
really.
don't, but... Well, you know, maybe I need to start doing it, get some extra clicks, get some extra viewers. Maybe I should start selling out, actually. So, you know, I'm glad you brought up the idea. Now I'm going to start doing them.
Well, you're
Because
welcome.
here on this podcast, he's announcing his step into top 10 lists or pop cover. It's perfect.
I'm a sellout now.
You heard it here, folks.
Another special thing about Bopper is recently, it was about a couple months ago, you actually came out on your stream, and I think that was pretty awesome. Do you kind of want to tell us your story, especially with us being like RPGaymer? You know, we kind of phase in and out of one of our, like, the true reasons that we're here is to, like, the gay in gaming, which is, you know, one of our huge pillars, and it's nice to bring people in who can kind of talk about their story and where they fit in the world with all this.
So I didn't expect it to happen on a stream, and I didn't really expect it to happen at all, and to do so publicly, because over the last, I'd say 6-7 months before I did, you know, I really had seriously started questioning my sexuality. And part of what I decided to do with my channel once it started to become more successful and more popular is that I started to make it a very gay-friendly space and trans-friendly space, something that in a lot of online gaming communities, that's just not there unless it specifically is a gay community for gamers. A lot of mainstream channels are either actively homophobic or they are neutral on the issue. They stay quiet. So I wanted to make that positive space. And even though I felt like I had really curated that space really well, when I was ready, both for myself and publicly, to come out, I was still extremely nervous about doing it online on a stream because, you know, I'm sure everybody else who has an audience, I will get those chuds in there that come in and are horrible to chat or to myself, you know, anti-gay, anti-trans. So I was definitely nervous about it, and it sort of snuck in there into a stream. I knew I was going to do it in the stream that I did, but I didn't know when. So it sort of started to come out. I wouldn't say natural because I was like, I got to force it to happen at some point. But that was pretty much what it was cultivating a community where that was something that I was actively, pushing for, which was an accepting space, and then just doing it when I felt like the time was right for myself, being fully comfortable in it. And even then, one of the things I want to stress is that I'm still not fully, comfortable in that way, because coming out as bi, there is a lot of biphobia that is distinct from homophobia in different spaces, and then I do continue to have feelings of an imposter almost, where because I can pass as straight and because I have for so long and have benefited from that, I haven't had to deal with the systematic issues that gay people face and trans people face.
Mhm.
It has made me feel like I'm not real or I'm not legitimate, and that's been like the big struggle for me. And coming out on stream actually helped a lot with that, because a lot of the people there were very supportive and helped legitimize that, even though I might not have struggled the same way that many people did, socially or economically, for my sexuality, that it was still legitimate. So coming out on stream and building that kind of community was, a great help for me. I might not know everything about what the struggle is, but it was still tough to do. But I'm glad I did it the way that I did, instead of making it like a dedicated announcement.
Yeah, I was there, and I will say, it was pretty awesome, and it was nice that it was just very natural, whether you had planned on it or not, because it's not like, again, going back to clickbait. People were coming in with this like, "Oh, Bopper has a message for us." It was really just a regular day, which I think was really nice. And at the same, well, for everyone else, it was a regular day. For you, it was a very meaningful day. And from what I gathered, being present, I mean, I would have known that everybody would have, for the most part, supported you anyways. But I mean, your streamers would die for you. They do so many things, like going on your Discord, seeing all the fan art that they do for you. I mean, they just pretty much live for you. So, I mean, would you say that reception generally has been pretty well?
Reception has been incredible. And I hate talking about it in this way, because I don't like talking about having a fan base, because for me, I haven't really internalized that. I'm still a very small channel, comparatively to a lot of people that are out there. But seeing all of the support, fan art, messages, I get people who message me on Twitter, Discord, Patreon, wherever it is, all the time, telling me how coming out on stream inspired them or made them feel more comfortable, or the fact that I'm someone in a gaming space, Fire Emblem especially, where there's no one that's publicly gay and out on YouTube or bi, that's been something that's helped them feel more accepted in the community. So it's been an honor to mean that to people. So it's been crazy, but it has been a very positive reception.
A little bit of a background here too. I messaged you back in January and about starting, a potential YouTube channel or a podcast, and just looking for advice from someone who did it. And I was very fortunate with you responding. And one of the things that you actually said to me in that message, that you were very excited that someone was willing to do something like RPGaymer and be open about it because of the representation or lack thereof in the community. And I just like, whether you are bi or straight, like it just having someone who noticed something like that and was just like a hard, steadfast ally was just so reassuring that there is a place for this, and like that we do belong here. So again, thank you so much for all the things that you have done and that you've inspired. And like, I hope that you keep fostering that great community. And like, I know you will, just because you're so great.
Well, thank you. And I will say, like, the great part though about there has been some negative reception to it. I don't want to make it seem like there hasn't, but the great part of being, open and out, not just for me, but for everybody else, is that as horrible as a lot of the, negative people, the homophobes and the transphobes and all the chuds out there are, is that when we create our space that they try to come into, I bait them all the time just to get that, sweet algorithm juice from Mr. YouTube, because they'll see interactions and then it starts big fights and people dogpile these people, and it just, so take their anger and inadvertently use it to support non-straight queer creators all over the internet. The gay agenda will spread far and wide.
I love that. That's amazing.
It sounds like what you're saying is there were some easy parts, but there might have been a certain difficulty level involved, which brings us to our topic of the day, which is difficulty in video gaming. Nice segue, Patrick. Score 1 for you there. Yeah. So Bopper, I feel like this is something that
I'm sorry, I have
pause for cheese.
Yeah.
Bopper, you are someone who I feel like really gets into the nitty gritty about difficulty in video games. So just starting out the topic, and Jason, I want to hear from you because I totally respect you in your silence, because I know you don't feel like you always have a voice when it comes to LGBT topics. So I think you're just letting us have our little platform here. So thank you for that. But I want to hear from you as well. But for you guys, what is difficulty in gaming? Like, if I just ask you simply, when you hear about difficulty, what is that to you?
For me, when I look at difficulty in games and that sort of word association you're bringing up, the first thing I really think of is a start screen and picking the mode that you want to play or the difficulty level you want to play at. Because for me, I know Patrick and I have talked about this quite a lot. I'm fine with difficulty in games, but I don't really like to increase the difficulty of a game to make challenges for myself or whatnot. I'd rather just enjoy the story, play through the campaign, experience the characters, whatever that looks like, and then kind of enjoy it from there. I'm someone that will very, very commonly look at whatever is normal or the, in quotations, developer intended way to play the game. And that's usually what I go for. I know a lot of people do enjoy higher difficulty games or the entire craziness that is the Dark Souls series, and games that are hard for the sake of being hard. I know that they're fun for some people, but that's just not quite for me. I am really someone that would rather go toward a good story, good combat system, good gameplay, and then leave the difficulty to where it should be and not make anything super excessive or overly difficult.
Boo! Pussy! No, I'm just joking.
Wow.
Wow, I didn't know I was invited onto a casual stream.
Oh, geez. Okay, I'll be over here, guys. Don't worry about me.
Get him out of here. He's being replaced. It's RPGaymer now. RP Bopper.
There you go.
Bopper, what how about you? Is difficulty, is it just pretty much like what you click on as soon as you start a game or select when you start a game, or is there more to it than that?
So I would say that the difficulty of a game is how much mastery of its mechanics a game is asking of you. So when you look at difficulty sliders, what generally is the case is that the higher you go on a difficulty, the more they're asking you to understand the mechanics of the game and what your threshold or what your margin of error is. So difficulty, the way I view it is things get harder the more mastery is required and the less margin of error you have in relation to that mastery.
Is that kind of how you decide what you're starting with when it comes to a game? Like how much mastery you feel like you have coming in, or is it you're just pretty much going to shoot for something more difficult at the very beginning regardless, whether you're new to a series or not?
It depends on the game. Generally, I go with hardest difficulty out of the box if it's adjustable later on, because I'm a crazy person who has an agenda that I'm trying to prove every time I play a game from its hardest out of the box difficulty. So that's usually why I start from harder difficulties when I'm playing a game fresh.
I'm with you there. I usually start with some of the harder difficulties and I work my way down depending on like what I'm experiencing. And I think the reason why is I kind of like rather jump into a game and find out it was too hard and dial it back instead of just like breezing through something, because a part of my enjoyment comes from that difficulty where like I like to be challenged in things. So if I'm just streaming through a game, like I'm just not enjoying it. And that just instantly brings to mind Nino Kuni 2, where when it launched before they patched it with some harder difficulties, you literally could just get through the game pretty much without dodging and just attacking. And I was having the worst time playing the game. So I don't like situations like that where you are just so unchallenged. Anyone could just sit there. Personally, I mean, to each their own, but I would much rather start with that harder and work my way down.
Bopper, for just my own clarity, like when did you start playing games?
I started playing games super young when I was born in 1996. And to do this to hey, if it makes you feel better, it was the end of 1996.
I thought this was a youngin' podcast.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So okay, well, I'm gonna get my retro cred on here because we didn't have the high-tech game consoles of 1996 or of 2000 when I roughly would have started playing games. 2000, 2001, around there. My parents had a Super Nintendo. That's what I played.
Okay, you're getting some respect back now.
Yeah. Super Mario World was and is my earliest gaming memory.
That's a good one.
The earliest game I remember, asking for was Super Mario Kart, because me and my dad would go to Funko Land and we would just sift through the Super Nintendo crate that they had. I guess it was clearance. They were like dumping it. They didn't want the stuff anymore. And, I would look at like the Nintendo 64 case and see all these, fancy newfangled games.
But there's Mario Kart for like $3,
like,
so you could just buy that instead.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, I'm not buying that shit. Like, you buying this? Says you get a job. And I'm like, I'm 4. And he's like, then you getting Super Nintendo games.
Did I stutter, boy?
Yeah. Basically. So it was that. And then the first console that I owned that was like mine, that was given to me, was Game Boy Advance. Mm-hmm. So that's
good
my
place.
Early memories, or other stuff. Played Nintendo 64 with cousins, that kind of stuff. So really, my earliest is Super Nintendo. That's where I started.
Copy that.
So there is a distance between your beginning and current, which is good. Do you think the difficulty has changed since you started gaming until now?
Yeah, because for me, what I'm thinking of is when I'm thinking of difficulty in games, I'm thinking of like easy, normal, hard. And you're talking about sliders and difficulty, which I feel like comes a little bit later, where you can kind of get those things. So I guess, yeah, to Patrick's question, how has it changed and what do you feel is the big differences there?
Well, the big thing that has obviously changed is options for difficulty. Out of the box now, most games now have difficulty options. Most action games and RPGs come with that. Wasn't always the case. Very rarely was the case, as far as I know. I know some games did have them, like the OG Castlevania had a easy mode and a hard mode in its Japanese version exclusively. But for the most part, more options is how it's changed. I actually think that games as a whole aren't easier now than they were. I think that what's changed is that games have become better at teaching you how to play in like the literal here's a tutorial sense, and the way that they sort of pull shenanigans has changed, because the days of Nintendo Power are long gone, where you can just look up anything online. So they have to draw difficulty or cheap difficulty from other places.
I find that interesting that you say like there's a lot of tutorial and like hand holding, because I actually think that games are a lot easier now than they used to be. Now, like my starting point was one gen before, because I did start with the original Nintendo. But if I compare something like the original Pokemon, so like Pokemon Blue and Red, to Sword and Shield, when we're talking like a series that's been pretty consistent, hands down, Sword and Shield are so much easier than Red and Blue were. Like Red and Blue would slaughter you mercilessly unless you kind of like knew how to manipulate the I think that in some ways games have been dumbed down a little bit more, to be more approachable, but also because of the introduction of all these tutorials that we're seeing. I mean, you even think about a game like Undertale, where the first character that you meet in the game's named Toriel after tutorial because they hold your hand and walk you through the dungeon. So I really think that like those games that are naturally no difficulty selection, I just think they are getting a lot easier than they used to.
Yeah, I think the one area where games definitely are easier is save systems, which is not really a design philosophy. Sometimes it is, but it's more so a technological change that's happened over time where, you know, if you want to be, I'm going to go back to Castlevania a lot during this.
Well, we have no
I love
issues with
Castlevania,
that.
yeah.
So big Castlevania fans here.
Because I've played through Castlevania on an NES cartridge, and I've played through it on the Anniversary Collection, and I will never play through it on a cartridge again because that is an awful experience because you have to beat it all in one sitting because there was no battery backed up save. Now that there are, it makes Castlevania a lot easier because even though the game is the same, because you can be like, I'm done for now. I'm going to put it down. I'm going to come back. I'll kick Frankenstein's ass later. I'll do the Medusa Hall later. You can come back to it because of save system. So it took, I think modern gaming has taken a lot of the grind out of playing games it's less of a marathon now compared to, you know, arcades or NES games pre, you know, the robust save systems that we have now.
I feel like different systems are differentiating in different ways. Are we seeing some places where it's being differentiated better or worse than what you're thinking? Like more options to save and put down, especially for classic games like that. Like you said, it really eases some people into approaching some games. But do you feel like we're seeing some differentiation in the way that difficulty is done, for better or worse?
So I would say that as far as like the differentiation of difficulty, it's just going to vary wildly between different studios, and then even then between different games from the same studios. I think where some games have actually gotten a little worse at difficulty.
I think that difficulty changes based on the type of game that you're playing, but I think it's also becoming sort of a system in itself where difficulty sells games. That's kind of the idea with Dark Souls, like you mentioned before. And something I haven't brought up yet is kind of a self-imposed difficulty, like a speed run or a challenge. So I feel like difficulty is becoming another aspect, almost like the controller that you use to play the game. So in a sense, it's becoming something separate from the entire game. And I think that's better. I think that developers are using it to make a game something different, something unique, and something you may not have seen otherwise or elsewhere. And that in itself, I think, can be good or bad. So for me, I think that I wouldn't say it's bad, but it's not necessarily preferable if a game is one of its selling points, rather, is its difficulty specifically. But I think that it's something that someone like, I'm assuming Patrick and you, Bopper, are probably fans of and enjoy that. And I can respect that. So I think that seeing it as sort of a way to sell a game and make it stand out is the way that it has become different. And I think that that is what is the good part about the difficulty in gaming changing over the years, especially if you look at it from the NES up to the PS4, PS5s of today.
Well, and I think some of it too, I mean, most games, what we just see is easy, standard, hard. And even though there are some differentiations between easy, standard, hard, I try to think of like some games that are doing it really well. And the first one that pops in my mind is Resident Evil, especially the more modern ones where we see dynamic difficulty. And that's basically like how you play and how well you're doing dictates how the rest of the game is going to go. And I know, Bopper, you hit Resident Evil a lot on your streams. Well, I mean, not a lot, but you had a period where you were hitting it for a little while. And some of the newer releases are great because they're really encouraging you to think about how you're going to play. Like, oh, this is a really tough point. I might not have a lot going into this boss, but the game's kind of programmed in my favor where this room before the boss is going to give me a lot, or enemies are going to do a little bit more or less damage depending on how well I'm playing. And I think for me, that's one way that difficulty's kind of been like catered in a really good way, because it's really just about your experience and not something that you've pre-selected. It's kind of like in the moment, dynamic and changing.
Yeah. So on the Resident Evil thing, I've streamed through to completion every mainline Resident Evil game except for 3 original and 6. So I've played a lot of it. I've played like half of 6 on stream, but
so bad.
It's so awful. But I want to talk about Resident Evil 4 and what it does, because I think this is a great example of how they implement and control for the difficulty. So Resident Evil 4 was really innovative. It's the earliest game that I know of that had the type of intensive dynamic difficulty that has become standard in a lot of games. So internally, the game has a scale of, I believe it's 1 to 10. It might be 1 to 11, but 1 to 10 is what I'm pretty sure it is in 4. And depending on, how well you're playing, are you taking a lot of damage? Are you missing a lot of your shots? Are you nailing all your shots? Are you having to heal a bunch? Are you never having the healing? The game will slide that number up and down. And as that number goes up and down, it determines the type of, drops that enemies will have. Will they drop you more ammo? Will they drop you more healing? Will they deal more damage? Will they deal less damage? Are enemies going to be more aggressive or less aggressive? Will their throwing weapons be more accurate or less accurate? That changes. So you can play the game on its out-of-the-box difficulty, which is normal. In the North American version of Resident Evil 4, there's only one difficulty out of the box. And you can make the game as hard as professional difficulty, its hard mode, by playing really well. All selecting professional mode does, which only unlocks after you beat the game, is that it locks you to the hardest difficulty slider.
I just wish more series could, and I'm sure it's a programming nightmare, but I just wish it's basically an algorithm, right? That they could tune that into different games, so there would be just different levels of enjoyment. Because when we talk about like static difficulty, and I think of RPGs, and I just think of the grind and how you can basically just get through any RPG by just literally farming experience and money. And it's something that I don't like, even though like RPGs are definitely my favorite genre of game. I don't think grinding makes for a fun experience. So I would love to see more games where they find a way to incorporate like that whole dynamic difficulty.
So, side question, Patrick, what do you think about Bravely Default? Because I feel like it deals with that directly, and it kind of plays with grinding as part of its core aspects.
So, again, it's not something that I like enjoy, but aside from Bravely Default 2 not necessarily being the greatest game, I go for something like that more than plot, and I just kind of suffer through that grind fest. Especially when you're playing on something like, I go in and playing a game like that on hard mode, and you have to, like, it's just so it really becomes a numbers crunch and not so much of how skilled you are when you're playing the game. And that's the thing about RPGs or some action games, is like a lot of enemies just become bullet sponges at that point, and it has nothing to do with your technique, especially with an RPG where your characters are literally just sitting there like waiting to be hit. Like, you can't do anything about that, so that's a little frustrating.
I wonder how a sort of dynamic role of a AI would work in an RPG though. So would it be based on like zones we're thinking, or something else that would actually kind of change it to the Resident Evil 4 example? Like, thinking out loud, I'm wondering, like, obviously it's probably not going to change middle of a fight. Maybe if the development team would realize after a fight you lost X amount of HP, so maybe the next couple fights will be lower enemy count or less spawns. I wonder if that would be good. Would it even work? I'm just thinking how that would work in a different genre, because in the Resident Evil example, it's perfect. It works for that series. There's a similar system in like Left 4 Dead and Borderlands and other shooters, things like that too, and it works there. But like, where else can it work in other genres or games, I wonder?
For JRPGs, I don't really have too many ideas on that. JRPGs is a genre that I like in principle. I think I like it, and then every time I play a JRPG, I get 10 to 15 hours in and then just stop playing it, not because I get bored or mad. It's just because it gets sort of lost in the shuffle. So it's a genre that I'm not the biggest expert in, so I don't know like the intricacies of like a long game difficulty balance for a JRPG and what you would want out of that.
If I was thinking of something like Fire Emblem, which is your claim to fame, I would think that you could see enemies maybe being scaled differently on future maps because it is chapter based, where when you complete a chapter, it could kind of like check how many characters you lost. Maybe enemy reinforcements would look a little bit different based on how many people you lost or how successfully you did. But if it's just like a standard RPG, I don't know how they would do that. I think maybe if we scaled experience points, so you kind of like soft cap your way through certain points. I don't know if that's necessarily like dynamic difficulty, but I think it is something that could stop people from just amassing a horde of experience. I have problems with just standard leveling up in general anyway, so I could go on and on about that, but I guess that's the only thing that I could see is like a soft cap.
Yeah, and there are RPGs I know of. I'm blanking on some names. I can see the games in my head where they tank the level curve intentionally so that if you want to grind your way out of a difficult situation, you have to dedicate yourself hours and hours and hours to doing it because they will just destroy the EXP yield.
I think
below your level.
Was Suikoden is one of them where you can't grind up past a certain point because it's based on like monster difficulty, and basically you're not seeing harder monsters until you get to the next section. I know that's one of them. Paper Mario does that.
Paper
as
Mario has a
well.
brutal curve,
Right, which I actually think like in terms of difficulty, Paper Mario does a really good job of scaling it.
Yeah, Paper Mario is it's not hard. You know, it was brutal to me as a kid when I played Thousand Year Door because I'm an idiot who didn't read.
Because you get booty jumped on that final boss.
Yeah, that even like the dragon locked me my first time I tried to play the game when I was like 8 or 9 because I didn't read anything and I was like, badges are stupid. Let's just dump all of our points in HP and try to brute force our way through.
So when it comes to these moments in games, like you're getting soft locked by that dragon in Paper Mario, or you're coming up to a hard boss or a hard section and you can't make it through, should games have adjustable difficulty settings? Like for me, I think of a game like Devil May Cry, especially the first one when it came out. That was a very new experience for a lot of people, and I think if you get so many game overs within the first few chapters, the game's like, yo, try easy mode because this is too hard for you. Do you feel like you should be able to adjust difficulty in games?
I think you should, because I feel like games aren't made for one particular person. They're made for large groups of people. So in the Devil May Cry example, that's a really good one. And if you were a young kid, honestly, Bopper, you were probably around this age. You were probably younger when that game came out on PS2. It might be too hard for you to get through that game. So I think
hang on, pause really quickly. Now, the PS2 was the system that came out before the PS3.
Yeah, just for your, did you know that, Bopper? I don't know if you knew that.
Just for your clarification. Yeah, just
okay.
I wasn't.
Sometimes my chronology on PlayStation gets a little
okay.
funky.
It was the flat, boxy looking one, not the one with the rounded top. That was.
Y'all, what's with this caveman console? I don't. PlayStation 2. What
we aren't homophobic on our station, but we sure are ageist.
Anyways.
Okay.
I will say I had a crisis moment recently when I brought my PlayStation 3 into school to use as a DVD player, and all the kids were like, damn, Mr. Bob, PlayStation 3, that's a throwback.
No, oh my God. A throwback to 2006?
That's dang, I remember playing that shit when I was 6, and I'm like, oh, so I was having the reaction you all were having to me saying 96. I'm just over here like, oh my God, PlayStation 3 is retro to some people.
Isn't it disgusting?
It's all relative.
It's gross.
As soon as you hit 21, you're officially old.
Yeah. So they're like, that, man, it was kind of banger though, because they were like, Resident Evil 4 on PlayStation 3, that was the game. And I'm like, that was the 4th time it was released, and I remember it being on GameCube.
Exactly. So, Bopper, that game probably came out around the time that you were maybe playing it. So it might be difficult for someone that isn't able to beat a level to really get into more video games. So to Capcom's point with that game, it's probably wise to have an option to actually go back and lower a difficulty so a gamer can actually enjoy their game and then think, maybe I want to play again, or maybe I want to keep going. So it kind of has merit financially almost to a company, but also just to evolve the gaming culture as a whole, to keep that sort of option there for people that need it.
Yeah, and it's funny because this is a thing that they have stuck with, Capcom, because Resident Evil 7 and Village also do the same thing. I assume the other Devil May Cry games do as well. I've only ever played 5, so
I think they do.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, I played 1 a little bit. Got to that spider boss, and I was like, I'm out.
Peace.
And because it did brutalize me. That's a game where it was too hard for me to really get through.
Ooh,
and
no,
the funny thing is that Devil May Cry was Resident Evil 4. It was the original build of Resident Evil 4.
Yeah, that's right.
And so it's interesting that they implemented the do you want to tune down to easy, and then Resident Evil 4 had the dynamic difficulty that will slide you between like easy, normal, and hard without you ever knowing it. So like they sort of discovered more artful ways to do it. But as far as the question of should games have difficulty options that let you change them mid-game, I think generally if you have difficulty options that the player chooses from, I think it's only fair to let players change it mid-game, because if you hand somebody a list that's like easy, normal, hard, and let's be real, most games now, like I played Last of Us 2 last year, and it's like very easy, normal, slightly above normal,
abnormal,
hard, very hard. You're gonna hate yourself. Like it has like 6-7 different difficulties that then each of them has like its own difficulty modifiers and different modes and stuff you can add. I think if you've got that much and the player, if you're playing the game for the first time, you have no idea what difficulty is going to be the most fun for you. I think it's only fair to let you change it, mid-game for most games. If games should have adjustable settings, that's up to each individual game, I think.
Do you think once you go down, though, you shouldn't be able to go back up? Because I'm thinking of games like Fallout or Elder Scrolls that, like, you can, if there's a part that you just can't get through, like, yeah, you just go into the settings and you can tap it down and all of a sudden you're doing 50% more damage, but then you can just tap it back up. And there's just something about the authenticity of playing the game, or like integrity. It just doesn't, I don't feel like it sounds like a good word. I don't know if I have a better word for it, but just while you're playing it, just being able to do that when you come up to some of the more difficult parts where, like, yeah, I mean, I think if you need to cap it down because it gets hard, that's fine, but should you be able to go back up? Should you even be playing on that setting in the first place? And there's no shame if you can't play it on that setting, but like, don't go back up just for the sake of feeling you have to play it on normal.
I like what you said there. I think that I would agree with you with kind of where I think you're going. I think you should be able to go back down into difficulty, but probably not back up. It makes the most sense to me to like follow it that way. And for that reason, like, you couldn't get past somewhere, so you can't actually beat that difficulty. So I don't think you should really, in a sense, cheat the game and yourself and your own experience by lowering it just to get back to a higher difficulty later. I feel like there's a game, maybe it is Fallout. So there is some game that prompts you that once you change it, you can't go back. And I think that's totally fine. I think you might as well do that. Enjoy the game where you were, and you're like, you know what? I screwed up and I shouldn't be on hard. I should be on normal, and just keep going.
I think,
because to be honest, what really pissed me off is if they're like, you
right?
can't. Oh, does it?
Yeah, Fire Emblem Fates lets you drop difficulty, but you can't go back up.
Right. And then I know the Etrian Odyssey series is the same way on some of the newer games, where if you pick to play on hard mode, it'll bump you back to standard if you are having a really hard time.
But let's be real, though. If you're playing Etrian Odyssey, you probably already enjoy difficult games, so I don't really think that thered be a problem there.
So you brought this up a lot earlier, Jason, and it sounds like we're really just dancing around the topic of intended difficulty, like what the developers created as the standard experience. And I feel like that's hard because it's something that is so subjective. It's different for everybody, but like, what does intended difficulty really mean to you? Because I feel like everything that we're kind of hitting dances around that topic.
Yeah, I got stuff to say here. So I think that the intended difficulty is an important phrase to remember, because I feel like that is the difficulty that a development company makes the game around. So they're basing it off of that idea. and that idea almost alone, thinking that a player will normally play through this and that's how they will experience and enjoy the game. So they're catering difficult enemies, attacks, moves, whatever it may be around that baseline. When you add higher difficulties, and this is kind of to Bopper's point earlier, you're probably adding and changing modifiers to make a game slightly easier or more difficult, but the player that is playing the game doesn't actually get better or worse at the game. They stay the same. So the game is modifying itself to make it easier or more difficult for the player. And I think that's fine. But when a game is made in a way that it is expected to be played on one setting, I think that's the true way to enjoy the game based on what the developers want you to do. So by that, I mean, that's how you should enjoy the story and the character and the challenge that the team thought, hey, this is what it's going to be. But if you're someone that really enjoys the extra challenge, you can modify your game so you die in one hit or there's less items. And that's fine. If you want to do that, you go right ahead.
Yeah, so when I look at like that, intended difficulty, my general belief is that games should be built from their highest difficulty down, instead of from like a normal mode and then you sort of scale it up. And the reason for that is because you can control for a scale down much more. If I tell you to take a hard game and make it easy, that's a lot easier than say, here's a kind of standard difficulty game, not too crazy, make it a lot harder. And you also have a week to do it. You're probably just going to start scaling numbers up and then not really able to control for what happens there. So, I think a terrible example of this would be Wolfenstein 2, The New Colossus. I love the reboot Wolfenstein games, except for Wolfenstein 2, partially because they just sort of scale the numbers up more and more. So you start dying really quickly. The enemies are bullet sponges that take, multiple magazines to just kill. And it loses the fun of Wolfenstein in the process, while technically being more difficult. It's clearly not the way that they intended for players to play the game. So I think it is actually best when games either, build the hard mode as the intended difficulty and they scale that down, or if they want to have that difficulty that's above the hardest mode out of the box, you make it unlockable. Something where you can say, okay, the player, if they're going to play this difficulty at all, we know that they're going to have all that game knowledge from a full playthrough, like what Resident Evil 4 does. You can't play professional out of the box. You have to beat the game on normal mode. Then the developers know, okay, you have all this knowledge, and maybe you want an extra challenge now that you've done it, so we're going to give you this little bonus.
Okay, I'm so with you on intended difficulty being built down. And I mean, I've seen that in your streams when you're playing Fire Emblem, and just how ludicrous the game gets with just like numbers of enemy units just being stupid, and it's not even a tactical game anymore at that point. You see it in things like Borderlands, where, like you said, enemies are just, I wasted like the entirety of my ammo for this gun in order to take it down. Like, I'm not really enjoying myself at this point. But I don't know how I feel about unlockable difficulties. And the reason why is, unless I'm playing a Final Fantasy game, I don't like replaying it. I just want to have that great experience the first time. I don't want to have to like beat it to try to have that better experience, because it's losing some of that authenticity of like, oh, now it's a challenge because I have this harder difficulty to play. And that's why I really enjoyed the game like Resident Evil 2, where the remake, where you could play hard mode or even standard mode right away, and it was already challenging enough that you felt like you really got that full experience.
Yeah, I'm also one that will not replay a game. I mean, you know me, it's a miracle if I even beat a game. So I will likely...
I'm forcing you to beat games on our streams.
It's true. So I will not go back and play games like that either, mainly because I've already enjoyed the story in the RPG, like you're saying. But when a game does have reason to go back and enjoy it, to play more, to get more content, or just enjoy the game in a completely different way, I will usually look again if I enjoy the game. And I think a perfect example of that, and to Bopper's previous point, a good example of a game that was developed around difficulty in mind, is Hades. And I think that game really shows you have to get a mastery first before you unlock the heat runs, which really changed the way the game is played completely. And you can scale it however you want. And I think that game makes it more fun for you as a player to develop your own skill in the actual game. And also, playing and replaying the game is actually integral to the plot and the actual story. So they really take that idea, and I feel like cultivate it to the kind of to the extreme and to the maximum, where like that is the point. The point is getting more difficult, more challenging, and replaying the game over and over. And it's done to such a fine degree that you want to keep going, and you've developed skills and you keep developing them. So you feel like you're getting more badass in the game, you're getting more badass as the player character, and then you finally defeat this game's story, and you just want to keep going.
A part of what helps that game too is that it's a roguelite. So naturally you aren't going to be able to predict what's going to happen in the game because it is different every time. And that's probably to the boon of most roguelites, where you are getting that different experience each time.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I think in that game, there's no difficulty option, I think you just start and then you just kind of go. And then you're expected to die, and you'll die a lot.
Yeah, so because what you all are saying is like you don't want to replay games, or like not that you all don't want to replay games, but that you're not always going to have the chance to replay the game. So gating content behind beating it, you know, feels like, okay, you're kind of getting strong armed a bit into, you know, having to play it again. And what I would say is that I think that having difficulties be unlockable can actually protect players from having a bad time on a first run. So if you have difficulties like the hard modes in No More Heroes that are balanced around New Game Plus, you don't want unsuspecting player who's like, well, I can handle hard mode, I play beat 'em ups all the time, to stumble into that and then have a terrible time because all the numbers are scaled to New Game Plus equipment. Or in the case of, you know, you can think of any other like action game. Resident Evil Village is a game where nobody should ever play Village of Shadows ever at all, especially not on a first playthrough. So by having that be unlockable, you can just make sure that players are not going to stumble into something that is going to be horrible for them, just not fun. And then sometimes I think unlockable difficulties can give developers, I think, a chance to have a lot of fun with the player that they don't normally get to have. So again, to keep it on Resident Evil 7 has my favorite unlockable difficulty ever in a game, which is Madhouse. So when you play the game the first time, you have to do it on normal or easy, which are the same game. Normal and easy are the exact same. When you jump to Madhouse, it's not really harder than normal. They just moved everything around. Item locations are changed, enemy locations are changed. So they use your game knowledge against you.
So it's just a completely new experience.
Yeah. So like the first half of that game is almost entirely rearranged. So the difficulty starts to come from your own complacency of thinking you know the game because you already beat it. So you've been through it. So then they can start throwing all kinds of crazy curveballs at you.
I love that. That's a different take on difficulty too, because that really does switch up like what you expect at all in a game, instead of it just being like you said, oh, this guy now takes 10 more shots to kill instead of 8. And basically what we're saying is I think Capcom might be the masters of game difficulty.
Yeah, basically that's the underlying theme of this podcast, if you didn't realize.
In fact, they're actually our number one sponsors, so thank you, Capcom, for the $1 million check.
And shout out to the Resident Evil 3 remake and Resident Evil Village for having 2 of the worst hard modes I've ever seen in games.
The Resident Evil 3 remake one, that final boss is just stupid.
Yeah, because those harder difficulties are balanced around New Game Plus items, but the final boss is not. It's like purely a reflex test, which the rest of the game is not preparing you for. And the last game I want to mention for adjustable difficulties is that a benefit of adjustable difficulties is that if you build them top down, the higher you go, the more developers can funnel players into that intended experience, what they want the player to get. So the Metro games, I love their hard modes, which are called Ranger and Ranger Hardcore. In those difficulties, your HUD is turned off and you die in one hit, but so do all the enemies. So it isn't just like a standard action, okay, I take more damage, enemy takes less damage. It's all of a sudden, all of us die in one hit, and it completely changes how you approach maps. It starts to reward a lot of more clever planning and stealth, while also like not being unfair and being like, okay, well, you know, you shot this enemy 15 times and it didn't die, and now you're completely screwed. It forces you to plan more, and then also rewards that planning in kind by pushing you towards their intended play style.
So do you think that is in fact a different difficulty mode, or if it's just a different mode of play? Or are we basically saying that like difficulties should be different modes of playing? And by that I mean, like, I love the Fallout series. When I play Fallout 4 and Fallout New Vegas, I play them on survival mode. I don't think survival mode is the intended way of playing. It's just literally a different form of the game. So are we thinking that like difficulty should be more like that, where it is just like a different mode completely? Or should difficulty still be difficulty, and then the best versions of it are these like unique modes?
Well, I think I think the best versions are the unique ones that force you to like learn the game in a more interesting way than just, okay, how do I like cheese and abuse things because all the damage sliders have gone insane? How do I take advantage of a lot of these mechanics more, which survival and Fallout does, Ranger Hardcore does in Metro, because it asks more of you in terms of understanding the mechanics while not like being unfair and punishing for just no reason. So I think we need to think about difficulty in a different way than just hard is hard and we just make all the sliders more difficult. And think about it like that play becomes more interesting the harder you go if it's done well. And sometimes that can appear like it's mechanical changes when it's really just the player having to engage with different mechanics at a higher level than what other difficulties ask.
I'm so here for that, though. I'm so here for that.
Basically, I don't like unfair, ridiculous, absurd bullshit difficulties because they're cheap and they're not interesting.
Well, and they're not approachable for anyone. Like we said, a different mode of play, it could be approachable for everyone, but like, the most ludicrous Resident Evil 3 difficulty isn't. Like, that is not
right.
Where, all of a sudden zombies dash at you 3 times and pretty much things are 2-shotting you. Nemesis can almost 1-shot you. It's just stupid at that point.
Yeah. I think it behooves developers to, if players are going to demand, I know a lot of players, I get a lot of flack of people saying, well, I want my stupid difficulties and my, dumb shit, crazy, unfair stuff, which is perfectly fair. I think that at that point, its developers are better off including clearly marked, these are challenge options that you can enforce on the game. This is Iron Man modes. These are, all kinds of crazy sliders that you can mess with and you can play with. This is not intended and you shouldn't do this, but if you want it, here it is.
So while we're talking about dumb and stupid and bullshit difficulty in games, what do you think about people that impose those things on themselves? So if we're going back to the Dark Souls banana controller, which you might have seen, like, are those fun to do? I mean, I would never do that, but is that something that you two, as the two resident game, I don't know, difficulty bros, do you think that's fun? Something that you would like to do? Or is it good for the community, bad for the community? What is it doing for you guys?
When I think of it on a base level, I think of kind of what you preach for Fire Emblem Bopper. So like Fire Emblem, you can easily, whenever you lose a character, just restart the chapter. But I mean, speaking of intended play, that's not the way the game was really intended to be played, but it's so easy to restart. So one thing that you got me doing for because I started with the first American release on the Game Boy Advance when it came out, and I've been playing Fire Emblem since. But just kind of like those are games I will replay because they're not too much of a time commitment. But going back and playing through those, I will do them in an Iron Man style because it does make the game a lot more enjoyable. So I think that there are certain ways to play games, like not resetting when you hit a trap in something like Skyrim, or something like bad happens, or you do the wrong quest selection and you don't like the reward you got. All those little things are in a way self-imposed challenges because you really have to stop yourself from reloading. They don't have to be so extreme as beating Dark Souls with the Guitar Hero guitar. We've used that example a few times on this channel. They can be really like minimal too. But I mean, Bopper, I think you're the one who probably does them a little bit more extreme, especially with some of your let's plays for Fire Emblem. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I have done Dark Souls challenge runs. I've done 0% growth Fire Emblem runs. I've done Resident Evil knife only runs. So I've done these, and I've done speed runs of Resident Evil, speed runs of things like Pikmin. So I've done a lot of these self-imposed challenges, and what I think is fun about them is that they're taking a game that you already know really well, and then it's you adding the conditions on top of it, and that's what can make it satisfying. So challenge runs can lead to a lot of really silly theory crafting for how games can be doable under horrible circumstances. That's why I like 0% growth runs in Fire Emblem, because it's basically saying, okay, all things being equal, what if you have the worst luck imaginable? What do you do? And I think that that's fun and appealing, but that's because I really like those games and I know them really well already. So I think like self-imposed challenges are good. I think they're good for communities, except for when there is sort of any elitism that comes around.
Oh, you wouldn't have any
them.
experience with that, would you?
No, I've never had any experience with people coming to me, because I've done things like, I remember I played Fire Emblem Awakening on stream. I played it on hard mode, which is which is I think the third most difficult option in that game, because there's Lunatic and then Lunatic Plus, and I had people telling me this run is illegitimate. It's come on, bro. Like,
you were just trying to have a decent time, and didn't you still almost lose every single character?
Everybody but 4 people died, but that's not to get lost in the weeds, but that's how Fire Emblem Awakening is built. It's built for like grinding and juggernauting. So if anything, I just made the game easier by killing off everyone else, because then I didn't have to think about it anymore.
It did go a lot faster when you got at that point, that's for sure. Well, I think it's sad a little bit when people have to create these self-imposed challenges when they aren't getting what they want out of a game. So like a game has the potential to be a great game, but in order to do that, you really have to play the game in your own way. I think that's a little, it's just sad, because it's almost like we're not getting exactly what we were hoping when developers make a game.
Yeah, I can see that to some extent, but for me, and like my experience with like Resident Evil 1 and Pikmin, I didn't like wish the games were harder, because I think those games are very well constructed for what they are, but I enjoyed the mechanics of them so much, I wanted to push. I think like those self-imposed challenges sort of pushing your understanding of the game to its extreme. So like, how can I route out Pikmin to get it done in the fewest number of days? How can I route out Resident Evil to beat it in the shortest number of times, or going through the shortest number of doors? I don't think like added difficulty sliders would necessarily make at least those specific examples more fun, because I find the fun part is like, I know these games really well, now let's test that knowledge in a way that's even crazier than what the game thought of. It's actually kind of fun, I think, coming up with things that developers didn't even think of.
In a way, completing those is probably a little liberating too, because I tend to be on the completionist side when I play a new game, and I don't always like that about myself. So seeing people go through different games like Resident Evil speedruns, or Fire Emblem, just like a minimal, just trying to bust through. It's that whole like liberation of, oh, they didn't do this, but it's okay because they're still getting through, and you don't have to do that to get through. Like, you don't have to do all the things in Dark Souls in order to get through this game. You can literally like beast mode your way through and still have a great time.
I do want to say on Dark Souls specifically that it is the example, because I've heard it used several times throughout here as sort of the example of this game is really, really hard. And the Souls games are hard. But I think they're a good example of intended difficulty, because there's only one difficulty option in all of the From Software Souls games, except for Sekiro, which inexplicably includes a hard mode.
What?
And, yeah.
I just beat that game at the beginning of COVID, and that is the only game I think I have ever rage quit on a final boss, because I was just kind of like, what and how the fuck? Like, I just don't even know. So there's a harder mode, Are you joking me?
I'm not joking.
What the fuck?
I don't know. Sekiro is the only like Miyazaki from software game I've never been able to beat. The thing about like the Dark Souls games is that like they are very peculiar about not necessarily how they want you to play, but the experience they want you to have. And a lot of Dark Souls really isn't that unfair. A lot of it was just a marketing gimmick by Bandai Namco calling it "Prepare to Die" and all that shit. Because really, what Dark Souls at its best is that it gives you really hard situations and then says sort of figure it out. You can either brute force your way through it by figuring out like kind of builds or weapons, experimenting around with different stuff, or you can use the environment to help you out. And then there's also a lot of the communal aspects to it, where in its online mode you can summon people to come help you out. You can summon NPCs even if you're not online to come help you out. People leave notes all over the place. It's a game that I think if you take full advantage of its tools is a lot easier than what its reputation is. Granted, it could teach its tools better, especially for things like summoning, because I find Dark Souls easy, and then people get mad at me when I'm like, yeah, I summon the NPCs to help because like that's what you're supposed to do. That's what the game wants you to do.
I mean, they gave you the resources for it, so you might as well take advantage of them. Also, the whole game is intentionally set up for failure, and using that, like, I think it's just great educationally to, oh yeah, you fucked up, what did you learn, instead of just flailing your way through things and just not noticing it. Kind of, not to like go into the realm of novels, but it kind of reminds me of Ender's Game, if you've read it, where even though Orson Scott Card is a bigot homophobe, the novel in itself, Ender plays this one game, and basically in it he's trying to get through this world, and he's like getting eaten by wolves and stuff like that, and he's constantly failing, but he's constantly learning from his mistakes, and it pushes him further and further to succeed. I just think it's a great metaphor for life. But that's Dark Souls kind of has that same mentality where, you know, yes, you are punished, and it is a harsh punishment. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. And the other thing I'd say, and this might help some people who struggle with Dark Souls is just Hades without the roguelite stuff.
Basically.
Because you have permanent progress and permanent knowledge that you're gaining. And actually, unlike Hades, it doesn't make earlier sections more difficult when you have to go through them multiple times.
Jason, does that upset you? Are you offended? You two should fight.
No, it's making me think differently about Dark Souls in that series and wonder if I should go back. The answer is still definitively no. I will never go back to that, but that's good to know. I appreciate the perspective.
Jason, you're supposed to stream Sekiro on our channel. It's on the list.
Don't make him stream Sekiro. No, come on, give him Dark Souls 1 or 2.
I want Jason to show some form of emotion at some point.
Yeah.
I've known Jason for like over 10 years now. I just want to see him rage at something.
Yeah, you only get one shot to get somebody back into like or attempt to get them into like the Souls and From Software games. And just make him play Dark Souls 1.
Sekiro is not that game.
No, Sekiro will reinforce his hatred of his games.
Oh no.
Because I can't handle it. I can't. I got to the giant ape. When that ape picked its head back up, I was like, fuck this game. I'm going home. Like, I'm done with this. Like, everybody else can go ninja. I'm not doing it.
When it reached its hand in its butt and threw poop at me, that's when I was like, I'm out. I'm out.
Thank you so much, Bopper, for your crazy insight on that. I actually learned a lot. I'm thinking differently about some games right now. Maybe I will go back and give Dark Souls another chance. But we want to hear from you guys too. What do you think about difficulty in games and the way difficulty has changed over the years? Should Jason play Dark Souls? Let us know. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at RPGaymer. And if you're enjoying this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you leave a review for us. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Pocket Cast. Leave a review. We'd really appreciate it. And it helps us get found by so many more gamers. And we would love to have them enjoy our podcast as much as you do.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
All right, gamers, we are back and we are ready for our game portion here. And actually today, Patrick made a game for all three of us. Patrick, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, we've actually played this game a few times on our channel now. I feel like it's just a staple at this point, so you're probably going to see it quite frequently. But we're going to play a game of Would You Rather, the Get Good edition. So
Get good.
get good. Basically, sum it up. Jason and I are going to throw out situations that we feel might be a little taxing as a gamer, and we're going to see what the other people kind of feel like. What would be the better option or worse option in terms of what you would choose between these two, and kind of go through the whole shenanigans of why. So, Jason, do you want to go ahead and start us out?
Yeah, I can go in and start. So I have a few examples, and I tried to keep them kind of in a similar realm. And granted, keep in mind, this is from a person that does not do these challenges, so I would say no to all of these. But the first one I'm throwing out there is, and you can pick whichever game in the series you'd like, but would you rather do a Legend of Zelda 3-heart only challenge or a Mega Man no-hit challenge?
You're
where if you get hit, you have to kill
fucking kidding
yourself.
me. I had a Legends of Zelda 3-heart challenge too.
Well, I mean, what do you think, Patrick? We'll start with you.
Okay, well, so Mega Man sucks. And that's the end of our podcast.
Oh, what? Just like hard close. That's just where it ends.
What was the Mega Man one again?
Mega Man no hit challenge. They've been on YouTube a while, but if you take damage from anything, you have to kill yourself immediately and start over from the last checkpoint.
Absolutely 100% the Legends of Zelda 3 hearts on any of the games. That's just stupid. I could definitely, like, at least in a Zelda game, that gives you a little room for error, but I am not a no margin of error person at all. So hands down, Zelda. And Zelda tends to be easier games, even if you think about some of the harder ones. I would say probably Ocarina of Time and A Link to the Past might be a little bit harder than some of the other ones, and even still, I wouldn't. How about you, Bopper? What would you choose?
Fuck that Mega Man one. I never even beat a Mega Man game. I played like Mega Man 2, X1, whatever. I can't beat any of that. I've beaten Zelda game. I've beaten most of the Zelda games, so I'm not fucking around no Mega Man. I'm taking the 3-heart challenge every day of the week.
Absolutely, like seriously, fuck that. Jason, the worst. Never.
Well, I'm sorry that I gave you a good option there. Like, you wanted good questions and I threw it
here. Let me use mine still then. This might balance it out a little bit more. So same thing. Would you rather beat a Legends of Zelda game with the 3-heart challenge or beat a Mario game with no power-ups?
Ooh. I think I would probably go with the Mega Man no hit challenge.
Weird.
No. Moving on from that, I feel like the Zelda one is typically easier because there's a little bit more room for error, but the Mario one is essentially a no-hit challenge as well, if I'm thinking about like NES Mario games.
Well, you typically start when you come back to life as like 2-hit Mario or Big Daddy Mario, if you will.
I think that I would probably go for Zelda just for pure enjoyment factor. But if I had to pick a Mario game, I think I would lean towards Mario 3 because I played the shit out of that. So I feel like that's probably one I could work at and do basically a no-hit Mario challenge.
Okay. Bopper?
Yeah, that one's a little, I didn't even think about the difference in games. By the way, BDM, all I can think is Big Dick Mario. Probably true.
Someone needs to draw that.
Actually, you know what? It's actually probably Luigi. BDL.
Exactly.
Big Dick Luigi. No, okay, I almost said someone should draw that, but no one should probably draw that.
It's probably been drawn.
It exists
a million times.
Everything
it's
exists
all over the place. If I could pick if you can pick any game, is any game open?
Yeah,
to pick in either series.
I said specifically when I planned this Ocarina of Time, but since Jason didn't like really say it, it's open. I think for both.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to think then what the easiest game in each series would be for those challenges. I think it would probably be New Super Mario Bros. On the DS would be the easiest. And then for Zelda, I don't know, 3-hit challenge is pretty tough for all the games. I'd say even like the technically easier ones like Link's Awakening, I'd probably go on no-hit Mario, New Super Mario Bros. On the DS.
Oh, I didn't think about that game.
Or no power-up.
I would actually choose a no power up Mario as well on that one. I think it would just be marginally easier just because, the game really doesn't get too hard until you're either in a ghost world or it's a little later on. And I think it's totally feasible. But there are some Zelda bosses that are just stupid. It's like a bullet hell. I'm thinking of like one of the ones in A Link to the Past, where it's the guy who you have to get in the light. No, it's the moth, and all the spikes are
Yeah,
going
the moth.
around. It's shooting all the
Mhm.
bullets at you. It's like, I need 4 fairies just to make it through this boss.
Yeah.
First off, Patrick, that is nowhere near what a bullet hell would be.
I mean, that's
but-
like the Legends of Zelda
okay.
bullet hell. Come on. Come on.
Because when I think about both those series, actually, with the exception of like Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, you know, all the games in both series honestly seem pretty good for these type of challenges, just because I think damage is avoidable in like all instances in these games, like with really big consistency. I can't think of any like Zelda where it's like really like bullshit hitboxes or attacks that are like unfair, unless maybe like, I don't know. I had controller issues with Skyward Sword, so maybe that.
Yeah, I was about to say, aside from maybe Skyward Sword, I'm with you.
Since you guys both lean towards The Legend of Zelda anyways, for the next challenge I actually have for you, it's for the same game, so we're going to pick which challenge you would like. This is for the original Final Fantasy on the NES. Would we rather do the all white mage challenge, where every class you pick is a white mage, or
Jason,
the
that's
lone
racist.
thief?
You racist.
Okay, if you want to take it that way. Or would you rather do the lone thief challenge, where you have a thief and 3 other classes, but the other 3 classes you instantly KO and you only play as a thief for the rest of the game?
Bopper, I know you're not the hugest on Final Fantasy. Does your knowledge or realm experience go that far back?
I have played NES Final Fantasy, and
Oh, he's a real man.
are we
Dang.
assuming now we're talking NES Final Fantasy? We're not talking about Dawn of Souls or any of that baby shit.
Oh, he's
NES,
name dropping now
NES.
too.
NES.
Who the fuck is this
Okay.
guy?
So NES Final Fantasy. I mean, it's got to be all white mage challenge. I think. Because I think 4 people would just be better than 1.
Yeah, I know the amount of damage is super limited for white mages. And I remember a comic from a very long time ago, a webcomic about a black mage reading like a Nintendo Power and talking about the all white mage challenge and how he said it would never work. But I feel like it'd be so much easier to do than solo thief, just because, I mean, like I'm thinking of all the instant death attacks in that game. And that's just like an instant party wipe, where at least for the white mages, you know, there's ways you can manip with items and stuff like that, you know, so definitely for white mages. Okay, I'm going to
What's the next
continue the trend of Final Fantasy, because of course I have a Final Fantasy example. This isn't necessarily beat the game, but these are challenges in the games. So would you rather
I think I know where this might be going.
get the Excalibur 2 in Final Fantasy 9? And if you're not familiar with that, you actually have to make it to the final dungeon under 12 hours.
It's absurd.
It is so absurd. I don't even know how someone found this. I'm sure it was that.
And then you have to
stupid
like
player's
then
guide.
you have to buy it.
Do you have to buy it at that point too?
Yeah, I think it's on a merchant. You have to still buy it.
Okay, so would you rather get the Excalibur 2 in Final Fantasy 9 or dodge 200 lightning bolts in the Thunder Plains to get the Venus Sigil for Lulu's ultimate weapon in Final Fantasy 10?
I knew it. I knew that's where I was like, this is where it's going. Okay, so I'm gonna cheat a little bit, because I actually did dodge the 200 lightning bolts. So
What?
I would say I would do that. And if for no other reason, in that you actually can do that, whereas the other one you could physically just miss it, because Final Fantasy 9 is 4 discs and like you got to get there really quick. That's ridiculous. Also, I would never play the game like that. I just wouldn't want to do it. So I would absolutely pick the lightning bolts.
Ooh, see, I don't know. I like 9 a lot.
It's a great game.
I might go
My
for
favorite.
that. I think I would go for that over because I like 10. I don't think I have that kind of dedication for 10. I would be more interested in the challenge by itself, of just trying to figure out and route through Final Fantasy 9 in such a way to get that, rather than like,
Yeah, that's actually a
dodging-
challenge where I feel like it's dexterous, like on the Final Fantasy 10 example.
Yeah.
I'm with you on this one, Bopper. Like, I don't think I have the patience to do something like the Thunder Plains challenge. I've tried it. I'm just kind of like, no, my ADHD just does not have the time for this. But I mean, in essence, Excalibur 2 is just a speed run, because you're going to be in the final dungeon anyways. So, you know, and you could chart out and map out, like you said, all the points that you need to hit in order to get through. And I remember back in the day on the PS1, like, I think in order to do some of it or to ease your burden a little bit, you'd actually have to open up the PS1 and close it during cutscenes, so it would skip the cutscene for you to save you some time.
Yeah,
like it was just stupid. But I'm definitely Excalibur 2 on that one, and I don't even know if I would ever actually do a speed run, but I think that would be the one that I would do.
Okay, so we were talking a lot about Dark Souls and those types of games earlier, so I am going to bring that up for this next one. So for this challenge, you can think of any game in the typical quote-unquote Dark Souls universe, Sekiro styles like that are rather difficult in general. So would you rather complete a game like a Dark Souls with the dance pad controller or the guitar controller?
No. I don't want to do either. Okay, Bopper, you go on this one. You go first.
I'm going Guitar Hero controller easily. Dark Souls 1. I think that would be not easy, but I can get on that Dance Dance Revolution pad. You can forget about that.
Yeah, I think it would be physically a lot more challenging too.
Yeah, because the Guitar Hero controller, at least, like, I can feel there's different ways you can hold it and think about it to where it'll probably start to feel like a normal controller after a while.
Yeah, and you're only relying on your hands than you are like the rest of your body. So I'm with you on that. I think instead, though, I would probably do Demon Souls, because Demon Souls is a little bit of an easier game comparatively.
Oh, if I can item dupe, then Demon Souls easily on the PS3 version, because then you just destroy the entire game and it doesn't matter. Actually, you know what? Yeah, I think you're right. I think Demon Souls, even glitchless, I think Demon Souls would be easier, because once you know that game, it's easier.
Oh yeah, that was a good one, Jason. Yay, good for you, Jason.
You're welcome. I do some things right.
Okay, we're gonna connect some Final Fantasy with some other things here, or Final Fantasy adjacent. So we're gonna go boss battles. Would you rather face Sephiroth in Kingdom Hearts without the ultimate weapon, or would you rather fight Sigrun, the final Valkyrie from God of War, on any difficulty above story difficulty? If you're
Sigrun
if you're
and the Valkyries.
If you're not familiar, like, Sephiroth is an optional boss. Well, they're both actually optional bosses.
They're both optional
in their respective games. Sephiroth is Sephiroth, he's just the badass that he is, but the Valkyrie in that game in God of War literally has the power of all the other Valkyries that you face up at that point. Jason, go for it.
Yeah, fuck the Valkyries. I hated the Valkyries. And I actually have beat Sephiroth, but I had the ultimate weapon. But if I wanted to be like cool gamer status card, I would try to go for the God of War one, just because that would be amazing. And I think there might be a trophy behind that too, which would be fun. But I think in terms of what's easier, I think the Sephiroth one is easier. It's just going to be, 45-minute fight. I don't even know how long that will take without a good weapon. But that's probably where I would lean.
Yeah, I'm going the Sigrun fight. For one, I've done that, so that kind of knocks that off anyway. But it is just more satisfying than just trying to artificially hamper yourself into just a slog fight.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because I fucking love God of War, like, a lot. I 100% of that game. Game's so good.
It is one of the best.
Yeah, so that one easy is the Sigrun fight.
I never felt like when I beat Sephiroth, I did anything that, like, a lot of people couldn't do. It was just cool that I fought Sephiroth. But when I beat Sigrun, it was like, holy shit. Like, I remember Scott was watching me. It was super epic. I lost 50 times. It was really hard. I didn't realize you were supposed to knock her out of the sky when she did that one attack, and that was why. But, I mean, I felt like I accomplished something when I finished that one. That was good.
That's okay. We want to talk about
yes, real gamer cred. I'm a real boy.
Well, did you do it on Gimme God of War?
No, I did it on standard. Cash
Illegitimate.
No, my elite card. It's melting.
That's a bad hard mode. Gimme God of War, but we're not going to talk about that.
Okay, we can talk about hard modes, because that's actually my next question. So the last one here, Bopper, you might not actually have done it, because I think you said you didn't play these games. But would you rather just beat the game, rather beat Devil May Cry 3 on Dante Must Die mode, or beat Ninja Gaiden Black on the Master Ninja mode? And if you don't know what those are, I can tell you. Do you need me to tell you?
Well, I know them by reputation.
See, exactly. Patrick?
I actually have
Patrick died because the question was so challenging.
No, well, I've never played Ninja Gaiden, but I am familiar with it, of course. But I don't even. I feel like Dante Must Die is still doable. I don't
see. I feel the other way, but this is
well. But I mean, like, not having not played, only watching YouTube videos of Ninja Gaiden. That's like a nope for me. You know, like there's just something about it just seems like, nope, this is top tier bullshit shenanigans that I'm not here for. So I would definitely do Devil May Cry.
Yeah, I'm going Devil May Cry on this one, if only because I've never played either game. But I played Devil May Cry 5, so I've kind of got a base to work with. And Ninja Gaiden, I played like the NES Ninja Gaiden on the Switch Online, got to the second level, and I'm like, you know, congratulations to everybody who beat this, but yeah, no,
not for me.
I'm done. No.
All right, last one. Bopper, this one caters to you more than it does Jason. Jason, you might have played both of these games, so we'll see. But I got a little Fire Emblem one for you. Would you rather beat Fire Emblem Path of Radiance without deploying, and I'm going to say her name as Titania, not Titania, no disrespect. I've always said Titania. Or Fire Emblem Awakening without deploying Robin? I feel like they're pretty balanced in what they do in their respective games. Would you agree, Bopper?
Well, are we talking a specific difficulty on here, or just the game in general?
Let's say hard mode.
Hard mode, I would say Path of Radiance without Titania, definitely.
Who's going to carry the game for you then?
You just solo it with Ike at that point.
Okay.
Because that's not that tough to do, really. But Awakening without Robin is, on hard mode, it is very much doable, but Robin's easily like your best bet to snowball someone really fast to just make the game a non-issue. More or less, you can make Path of Radiance a non-issue more quickly than Awakening without Robin.
Do you think that would be the same on Lunatic mode?
No, Lunatic mode, then it's definitely Path of Radiance on any difficulty. Hard mode, Maniac mode, I don't care what it is. I'm not doing Lunatic Awakening without Robin.
Okay.
Ever.
Good to know. Jason?
So for me, what I would rather do is just own Path of Radiance, because that game's way too expensive and I will never have it. That's my issue.
Rent.
Well, I'm glad all these challenging questions are over, because I'm kind of tired just thinking about playing these games. And we want to know what you guys think too. What challenges would you want to do, and what challenges would you not want to do? Again, hit us up on HeyRPGaymer at Twitter and Instagram. And remember, you can always give us a review online for our podcast. We appreciate that as well. We want to give one big last shout out and thank you to our guest today, Bopper. Really appreciate being on. Honestly, it was really, really fun. I know Patrick and I both had a blast. Did you want to give any shout outs or plugs for what you got coming up next?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you all for having me on. It was an honor and it was a lot of fun to be on. But yeah, everybody listening, I'll just, I'll shill for myself. Go subscribe, Professor Bopper on YouTube. It's good stuff. I think it's good stuff. Check me out there, Twitter, Patreon, wherever. And again, thank you all for having me. It was a blast.
Super thank you so much for being open to coming, literally for all of your content. Like, it's so great. And what's the word I'm looking for? It's just like incredible to see someone who's as passionate about video games as I am and Jason is, who's producing that like great content that really makes you think about such simple things, and it really lets you know that you're not alone in how highly you enjoy something. So thank you for taking the time to be here with us. I mean, and sharing your story, which is just incredible.
Thank you once again. It's an honor, and I was happy to be a part of this.